Imagine this. I have to now stop a school shooting in a school that my daughter's a senior, and my son is a freshman in that school.
I'm Sarah Ferris, true crime podcast producer.
And I'm Katherine Schweit, former head of the FBI's active shooter program.
And you're listening to Stop the Killing. Welcome to today's episode of Stop the Killing. Today I am joined by our fabulous guest, Tom Smith from the Gold Shields podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure.
Oh, it's such a joy. Now, I have met you in person, which is most unusual normally for these guests, especially in America. But Tom and I actually crossed paths in Nashville at CrimeCon, and we got to talking, and there was just so much that sort of crossed over. And I thought, oh, well, I'll just keep Tom in the back of my mind as a great guest, but I'll see where it can segue into Stop the Killing. However, fast forward to a couple of weeks ago when I was listening to a podcast episode that you did with friends of our show, Housewives of True Crime, and you just glossed over at the end of that podcast an incredible story that kind of crossed over your career with your family. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But first of all, can you just tell the audience a little bit about your background and your podcast and how you ended up here?
Sure. I did 30 years in the NYPD as a detective and enjoyed every minute of it. It was what I always wanted to do. My dad was a retired NYPD detective, so I grew up in that world. He was my hero. It's what I wanted to do. You know, so many kids in life say, I want to be like my dad, and I actually got to, so I was very lucky to do that. And, I had a goal in my career, and it was propelled by something my dad had told me when I graduated the academy. He said, listen, if you're going to do this job, do it great. Whether you're answering a phone or doing a homicide case, just do everything great and the best you can do. And I just carried that with me my entire career. So I just put every ounce of energy I ever could in everything I did. And, sometimes that worked out great. And sometimes I got yelled at by my partners because I wouldn't sleep and I wouldn't go home and I wouldn't eat. And, and they would yell at me for, hey, Tom, it's midnight. Can we eat? Oh, okay. And the reason for that was something very specific. I always had this vision in my mind of the bad guy I was chasing or looking for sitting on his couch at home laughing at me that I couldn't find him.
Wow.
And that was always in my head. And it drove me to just do, what I could and hope. And thankfully, through 30 years, I was successful in, the plainclothes unit I was in after patrol for a couple of years in the west side of Harlem when New York City was completely out of control with over 3,000 homicides a year and 115,000 robberies and 88,000 rapes. That was New York City at the time in the early 90s. And going to work every day, you had to be good. You had to know your job because of just how busy we were. And, I had a goal of being a detective and went to narcotics and got promoted when I was in narcotics and the gang unit and, the Bronx robbery squad. And then my entire life changed when 9/11 happened. 9/11 changed my career, changed my family, changed everything about anything I wanted to do in my job. I would have been very happy being a homicide detective in the Bronx. That was my goal. That's what I wanted to do. My dad did it. That's where I wanted to be. And if I ended up there, I would have been the happiest guy in the world. And then again, 9/11 happened and I got asked to go to the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force in New York, which was a very elite unit in the NYPD to go to. If you think about it this way, before 9/11, there were only 11 detectives assigned to JTTF before 9/11.
Wow.
And then after 9/11, even these numbers, there's about 8,000 or 9,000 detectives in the NYPD. There were only 100 of us in the JTTF that were asked to go there. So it was a unit that you had to be good, you had to be on your game, and you had to realize what it meant, what you were doing. You weren't chasing the crackhead on the corner anymore. You were chasing people that wanted to blow the world up and wanted to perpetuate another 9/11. anywhere in the world. And we were responsible for that. And, I took it serious. I took the clearances serious and everything we were doing. And thankfully, again, was successful in a lot of areas and cases that I got to do. And, when you're a detective in the NYPD, going to Jersey is like a big deal. Like that's a nice trip for the day. And then I found myself in 18 different countries while I was at JTTF, and it was in Afghanistan for 3 months doing a kidnapping case of a New York Times reporter. So I got to do a lot of things that the normal, detective doesn't get to do. And I cherished it. And I loved every minute of it. And then 30 years hit, and that was a nice round number to call it a day. I was still young. I was still healthy, still had everything going. So it was a good time to get out and call it a day, which I did. And it was a little weird at first, not working. People ask me all the time, what was it like retiring after so long? And I said, it's kind of like walking forward for 30 years and then someone telling you have to walk backwards. It's hard at first. You'll get it. But at first you're going to stumble and it's going to be weird, but you'll eventually get used to it. And that's kind of what it was like. So I wanted to find something else to do. And that leads me to the final point of this story. I got together with an old partner of mine and my old sergeant, Dan Murphy, and threw the idea of doing a podcast at him. And at first he went, okay, well, on what? And we came up with the idea of there was so much going on during the time I retired, 2020, 2021, that were throwing law enforcement, federal law enforcement, everyone under a bus. It was just a hard time to be a cop, to be in law enforcement. So we said, why don't we just start highlighting all the great cases out there that no one knows about and get these stories out there so more people understand what's going on in this profession. It's not a 9-to-5 job. It's not easy. It's hard as hell, both mentally and physically. And we need to bring that out. And then that led to military missions of getting those stories out because we were so close with military families. And the difference in our show and what we do is we actually get the detectives, agents, military members who actually did those missions in those cases on our show, and they tell their own story. We don't tell other people's stories. We have the people who actually did the cases and those missions on the show, and they tell their own story. And the show is theirs. Dan and I are just kind of guardrails of kind of just making sure it goes in the right direction. And the stories we hear blow our mind. There's a lot of times that, I'll talk to guests that we're going to have on. We know why we're having them on, the case in general, what it's about. But I don't want to hear the whole story until we record the show, because I want our emotions and our reaction to it to be authentic. And thankfully, it's been successful, and we're just going to keep doing it. We're finishing up season 2, going into season 3, which we would have never in a million years ever thought of when we started this. So
Congrats.
It's been fun, and the best part of it is the people we meet.
Yeah, it just happens. I mean, that's Sarah and I have kind of some similar stories, and it does just happen.
Having heard Tom's intro there, you can see why I was like, well, where do you begin to pull a story out of Tom Smith? But Tom, can you set the table of the story that we're going to talk about today for the listeners?
Sure. In 2011, I was asked to go to one of the RAs, which is a satellite office of the FBI.
Resident agency. I'm gonna fill in all the acronyms while he talks.
Yeah, we've already off air. We've just had a conversation about the alphabet soup that's been thrown around already all over this. So thank you, Katherine.
We'll do subtitles.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Right. We're going to send out in the show notes. We're going to attach a list of acronyms.
Yeah, for sure. Just
for
me.
A long list.
Just for me. I love it.
So I got asked to if I'd be interested in going to one of the resident agencies, which is a satellite office outside of New York City to cover outside counties of New York. And it's a JTTF, it's a team, nothing's different. It's just your coverage and where your responsibility is different than just New York City. It's surrounding counties where the office is. So I obviously said yes because
it's a cool job. Because going to an RA is generally lower, financial expenses in terms of housing and kind of cool stuff.
Well, mine was even better because it was 3 minutes from my house. So
Score.
I couldn't say no. And you know what? At first it was rough. It was different. It was weird to get used to because of just the main office and being on fire every day, and kind of scaling it back a little bit. Took a little time, but it worked out great. So around 2018, my partner calls me one night. I had just left to go home. And my partner calls me, says, "Hey, we got a problem." I said, "Okay, what's up?" She said, "Can you come back here and meet me? It's about a threat to the high school." Now, the high school is my hometown's high school, which 2 of my kids are still in at this point. The local police department got a tip from one young, brave girl who was on a group chat one night and saw a couple of postings that she didn't like. She felt were weird, felt were a little threatening, so she started taking screenshots of it. And what they were what if scenarios. What if someone happened to shoot the school up? What if someone left a letter or a note in the bathroom? And that's how it starts. And 4 or 5 people on this group, she was the only one who started taking shots and went to the local police department and let them know. They contacted us because they just thought it was going to be a little bit more in depth than what they could do. So luckily, my partner was a computer geek and she had already had covert social media accounts set up because of where she was working before she came to our team. So she already had that in place. And Mel knew my family, knew my kids, knew what was at stake. And we immediately started looking into this individual. We didn't have enough to lock him up, obviously, right away, just on the mere texting of some thoughts or whatever. But we weren't going to stop there because we both had a feeling this was just not good. You get after the amount of time we both had on the job, you get that feeling that you don't let go and you have to run with it and you have to trust yourself. And we did. And we started getting into his social media. He immediately latched onto her accounts and friended and added, and everything that goes on when you now have the ability to see his postings. We come to realize that one of his accounts actually has the name of one of the Columbine shooters as his identification. We start to see pictures of shotguns and drawings and how he is always commenting on other school shooters. Just a list. I mean, the world opened up criminality-wise when we got into this. So we got more and more information on him. And none of it was good. Then we started, okay, let's, in the background, start doing some interviews and see where we're at. We come to the conclusion after a certain amount of interviews that we do in the school with students, he kept asking everybody when the last day of school was. When's the last day of school? When's the last day of school? And it kept going, when the last day of school is. Why are you asking me? Oh, I just want to make sure. So to us, that was the target date. And that was only about 6 or 7 days away. So we had a lot to do. Imagine this. I have to now stop a school shooting in a school that my daughter's a senior and my son is a freshman in that school.
What does dinner around the table look like that night in your house? Because presumably you're holding those cards very close to your chest.
Yeah, I had the only part that my daughter had any thought or inkling of was I had showed her the picture of this kid and went, "Who is he?" And she said, "I know who I don't know him, but I know who he is." I go, "Oh, okay, fine." And that was kind of the end of discussions I had with her because I didn't want her involved, nor would I get her. I was not going to go there. So anything going forward with the investigation, she wasn't in the loop. I wasn't updating her. And she understood where I was and what I was doing. I mean, she's, my kids know what I do.
Kids get that. You grow up in this environment. Your parents aren't going to tell you their classified cases they're working on and why they're going to Afghanistan or England or, you come home and you got to eat your words. And
Oh yeah, and
you
even
can't
though
have
this
that
was
kind of
an
discussion.
unclassified case at the time, it still wasn't going to be something there was no need for it.
Mm-mm.
So the conversations were, what they were. I wouldn't involve her. She knew I was out late all the time. We were running here, running there, so she kind of knew, this was off and running, and it was something not good. She just put all that together. So we were trial prepping while we were doing this case. We were getting files in order, and we end up finding out that through one of the interviews that we did, he actually went to a Dick's Sporting Goods, asked about shotguns, and asked the salesperson what was the shotgun shell that could do the most damage to a human body. And again, we didn't feel we were there yet with having enough to arrest him, but we kept gathering information. And then one night, we knew through monitoring him that he was in Maryland at a basketball tournament. So we kept track of, and he would do like live feeds. So he was just feeding into everything we wanted. He was into. And then the final thing, while he was away, he makes a post saying, "I need a gun." That was enough. At that point, we said, okay, that's the nail. Let's start with the DA's office to drum this up. And believe it or not, we literally had to talk the DA into arresting him. It was mind-blowing that at this day and age, in something we wanted to prevent and stop, we literally had to talk. He didn't want to. He didn't want to give us a search warrant. We're all standing around a speakerphone, and the DA is giving his explanation of why he didn't want to do this. And the two detectives, the chief and my partner, are staring at me, waiting for me to lose my mind. And I'm just standing there at first. And then finally, he said something that was just too much. So I lean down, I turn the phone towards me, and now Melissa kind of puts her hand over her head like, here we go. And I asked the DA, I said, "Hey, can you do me a favor?" He said, "What?" I go, "Can you spell your name?" He goes, "Why do you want to know I just spell your name for me." So he spells, I said, "How do you pronounce it?" So he goes, "Can I ask you why?" I go, "I'll tell you in a minute. Just tell me how you pronounce your name." So he tells me, I go, "Okay," because I just want to get it right when I'm standing in the parking lot and there's dead bodies in the school behind me. I want to make sure I get your name right about this conversation we're having right now. And he goes, "That's not funny." I go, "This isn't funny. All right, this is going to happen. All right, this is not a game. This is not a veiled threat. This is going to happen. And if we don't take this kid off the street, that press conference is going to happen. And I will throw you immediately under a bus, just to make sure you understand that." So with that, he agreed, write the warrants. We were going to lock him up, miraculously. So
did you get a search and did you get an arrest warrant also?
no, we just had,
search warrants.
we knew we were going to arrest him because we knew what was going to be, what we were going to get. So we didn't want the clock to start, and all that. So we just got the search warrant. So we set up
and for our listeners, getting the search warrant is probable cause that you believe there's going to be evidence of a crime at that location. So the value in that is that when you go and you do the search, you get more information to include in your arrest warrant. It makes your arrest warrant stronger. It makes you more able to hold the arrest, keep somebody in jail if you need to, because you find out they're a danger to themselves or others, things like that. So that's why you wouldn't necessarily get an arrest warrant, or maybe even a DA might not give you an arrest warrant, or U.S. attorney, at the very beginning, just to explain the difference.
Yeah, absolutely right. We actually laid out the charges we were going to charge him with. We just didn't yet.
You have to know what kind of evidence you think you're going to look for that's going to get you those particular charges. That's smart, of course.
Yep. So we come up with a plan. Now we know he's on his way back from Maryland with his mom. So we set up this plan that with the state police, with us, we went to the house before he even got home. We got into the house. His dad was home. We set up what we were going to do. The state police actually were lined up on the highways waiting for his car to pass them and would just relay to us on the radio where they were at. So
in Maryland, just for the listeners, how far away? That drive is what, 5 hours?
Yeah, at least.
Yeah.
Yep. Wow. About 4 or 5 hours. So we had time, and we had the father call the mother when we got there and ask, "Hey, just want to know where you're at." So we knew where he was at that point. So He gets home. The state police have him. They hit their siren. That was the signal that he was on the street. So we get outside in the driveway. We get him out of the car. We handcuff him right there out of the car because we don't know if he has the gun on him, if he got one down there. Then we have him secure in one of the local PD's trucks. So we start our search, and he's sitting in the car. No one's talking to him. We leave him alone, and we find everything we thought we'd find. We find research papers of every serial killer you can think of, binded, and laid out on every killer you could think of. We find a little shrine for the Columbine shooters. Then we keep looking, and we find the diagram of the classroom he was going to do this in, with little red circles around certain desks that he had drawn. On the back of that paper, we find the hit list of the 5 kids he was going to kill. So we got him.
Wow.
Go outside. I go up to the car, and, he makes some, hey, you want to know how I was going to do it? And he's like, he's happy. He's proud of everything that's going on.
Oh my goodness.
So we have a conversation, and in the middle of that conversation, he goes, oh yeah, by the way, there's a pipe bomb under my bed. So not getting him excited, because I don't want to do that. I don't want to make him think that we're jumping at his every word. So calmly walk over and get everyone out of the house, and the bomb squad goes in, and it was the pieces of a pipe bomb, wasn't actually the pipe bomb, but the attempt was there. So we end up arresting him, and New York being New York, he gets out pretty quick. We end up actually locking him up 3 separate times because he wouldn't stop the threats. We locked him up the first time. It was all over the news. It blew up. It was, everywhere. He does it again because we don't stop monitoring. He doesn't know all those social media platforms are us. He still doesn't know. So we just stayed up on him. And the next step was, well, I'm going to blow the school up. And he's videotaping gasoline cans and all this. So we arrest him again. We do another warrant. And now we find in the garage all research he did on the Boston Marathon bombing, just IEDs, all, a whole more stuff. So we end up arresting him again, and we arrest him a third time, and the third time is actually federally. We actually finally got him on a federal charge the third
Yay.
time.
I'm just going to say that most criminals don't want to be arrested federally.
Right.
Because you do your time. If you get a year, you do a year. If you get 5 years, you do 5 years. The feds are tougher about whether they'll charge.
Oh, yeah. The U.S. attorney we had did a great job. He got 5 years. At some point with someone like this, he's eventually going to get out, and that's the sad part. And that's the one thing we had to convince and tell all the parents about. So, shifting a little bit into the personal part of this, the 5 kids that were on that hit list, I knew personally. They were my daughter's friends. Every one of them I knew. So I'm looking at the list like, okay, wow. So now we have to interview them the next day. We have to let them know what happened, because now we're at the house late. So now the next morning we have to do, the notifications.
Explain that, because people don't realize that's part of the job.
Yeah. When you're the possible victim of a crime, you have to be notified of what the threat is, what the investigation was, how we came about it, to make sure they're safe, they're understanding of what's going on, and they need to take their own precautions in keeping safe.
It's a victim rights law, right? That didn't exist before. So we want to make sure part of victims' rights is that they're not blindsided by something that law enforcement knows that they were a potential victim. So you go and interview these kids.
Yep. And it was, one of the victims wasn't home, who I knew. So I actually had to get my daughter to text him like, hey, I need to talk to him. So all of them know me. All of them know what I did. So now he's flipping out that, what's the matter? Why does your dad need to talk to me?
God,
so
yeah.
we actually get him, and notify everybody. And the parents couldn't have been more thankful for what had taken place. And the one drawback to this, not drawback, but the one thing everyone will remember, unfortunately, was that graduation. We locked him up about a week before that graduation ceremony for the seniors. That graduation ceremony looked like a war zone. We had snipers, we had temporary headquarters set up, guys on THVs, because, and here's why, we were 99.999% sure he was alone. But there was that 0.00001% that, did he talk to someone that we missed? And we had to take the precautions to make sure that graduation was safe. And
I'm just going to say, this is why you pay and train law enforcement, because not a single person probably listening to this would have even thought about that. But that is what our job is, to think about things that you don't, so you don't have to think about them.
Yep, absolutely. And that's what it was. We weren't comfortable, with just leaving it out there. And although there were 2 state trooper cars parked in his, because he was home at the time, because he was released, there were 2 New York State troopers in his driveway. So we knew he was covered, but we still had to make sure of everything else. And my job that night was shadowing the principal. I was behind the stage. I was everywhere he went, I went, because the graduation's outside. It's on the football field. So you have to account for an outdoor venue to try to keep secure and safe. And no one will forget that graduation. But again, everyone felt safe. It was weird looking at, but everyone knew that they were going to be okay, and we had it covered and nothing happened, obviously. There was so much that we learned from this case, the whole leaking part. People who are planning this, especially young people, don't have the ability to keep it inside them. They can't keep it inside them, and they'll let out little crumbs, and that was, when's the last day of school, going to Dick's and asking about a certain ammunition. They cannot hold it in. The last text, I need a gun. They can't keep it inside them. And that's why when I talk in schools, in colleges and police academies, especially colleges, I'll implore these kids to make sure you're understanding what you're reading on social media and looking at, because if it's a little, that's weird, why would he say that? That might be something. And you need to bring it to the attention of someone, because the smallest little thing can make a huge impact on a situation, on a case. And there isn't a law enforcement agency in the world who has the reach that these kids have on social media. There's none. I don't care who you are. Their ability to keep track of things that are coming in and watch and listen and read is way above anything any law enforcement agency can do. And I tell them that all the time, wherever I go and speak. It's really important. And they get it. They understand the power they have in maybe preventing something like this. And like I said, going back to the very beginning, one brave young girl who just went, nah, that's not cool, and brought it to the attention, and look what happened. She used the sole purpose of stopping that shooting from occurring.
So inspiring when you hear these stories of prevented attacks. He's almost checking every single box that we talk about with the leakage and the change of behaviors, everything, isn't he, Katherine?
Yeah, he is. And that's when we first started this podcast. For our loyal listeners, they will know, but for anybody who might not have heard this podcast before, when we started, that was where we kind of started from, was what are the signs that might have been out there that maybe people didn't realize were signs. And so I would talk about a case, and Sarah, I would say, what did you pick out, Sarah? And through 5 seasons, right? Through a couple hundred episodes, she got better and better about leakage. As soon as you started talking about that message, I thought, Sarah is thinking leakage in her head.
Leakage.
And that is it. But it is that one, it can be one thing. But the other thing, when you mentioned about how when you go and talk to people, is the urgency. I think that's the other point that I always try to stress, because as investigators, we only have so much time to do things. It takes time to get a search warrant. You can't just arrest somebody all the time, and you can't throw somebody in jail and hold on to somebody. And that kind of time to get the work done that it took you and the team to do, only happens if somebody gives us those tidbits for leakage. And we know from research at the FBI that in the case of school shootings, when we looked over school shooters over a 14-year period, 92% of the shooters in schools leaked things. The behavior was there. To classmates, 92% to classmates, 75% to teachers. They see things, they hear things. And so it's getting past that. This isn't snitching to get somebody in trouble. It's telling to get somebody help. In that case, saved classmates' lives.
You brought up a great point that people are worried about not getting something right or getting someone in trouble. And I tell them all the time, I said, listen, I hope you're wrong. I hope you're wrong, with what you're telling me. And then I really explain to them how it works. If they point out individual A made a threat and whatever it was, I am not going to go to individual A and tell them you told me. That's not how it works. But people don't know that. Kids are so wrapped up in, like you said, I don't want to be a snitch. I don't want to be wrong, and then, the horrible thing I say to them, and this kind of gets to them. I tell them, don't be that person. Don't be that person that didn't say anything, and now you have to live with that. If this had happened and there's dead classmates, you have to look in the mirror every day and say, oh my God, I knew, and I didn't say anything. You don't want to live with that for the rest of your life. And when I say that, you kind of see them kind of sit back a little in their chair in a classroom and be, okay, yeah, that makes sense. You don't want to be that person. And thankfully, this one worked out the way it did.
Thankfully, for sure. And I want to have you comment about what you found in the kid's bedroom, because I recently was working a school shooting and I had this conversation. Your child's bedroom, they have no privacy rights. So stop thinking your child has privacy rights in their bedroom. And because we already are struggling from an investigative standpoint of not knowing what's on a child's computer and not knowing what's on their phone and in all of their IT world. But physically finding papers in a physical bedroom, if I had to count the number of cases of shooters where the search has turned up posters on walls and binders of papers and printouts of how to make bombs, I feel like every case I've ever read about or worked on that has shown up in the search. Please go into your kids' bedrooms and see what's there.
Oh yeah, especially when, how many times have you heard, I kind of had a feeling this was, okay, then what'd you do?
Yeah.
Putting a veil over your head because it's your kid is not going to stop it. Hoping that you're wrong is not going to stop it.
And 10% of our shooters that we first did our research on, 10% of them killed a family member first.
No doubt about it. Absolutely.
You're going to be saving your own life.
Yep. And, it's hard to do and it's discipline. I get it, but be a parent. Don't be a friend. Be a parent. And you have to go into a kind of safety mode for your kid as well as everybody else.
Tom, this, but maybe the public doesn't realize it. We talked about it here and there. We talk about it on the podcast a couple of times. When a shooting happens at a school or a university, the 911 operators get calls from a handful of parents every time who say, my kid might be the shooter. Mm-hmm. And that always makes me think, what does that parent know about their kid that they're not telling the school counselor or their family doctor or their pastor or their principal? What do those parents know about their kid that makes them think that there's a pretty good chance they just shot up their own school?
Right. That happened in the last two shootings. The last two shootings here in America with those circumstances where parents
very common.
Oh, you're 100% right. Mm-hmm. And why does that happen? Because it's your kid. Because you know your kid and you know when something's wrong. And that's what prompts that phone call. Your child, whether it's a good mood, they're not doing too good today. Maybe something happened over a length of time that is making an impact on them. And that's why those calls get made, because they know their kid. But you can't wait till you hear about something terrible happen before you make a phone call. It's got to be done beforehand.
Tom, how are things now there? How did they recover from that?
The school did a great job with what they had to do. I'm very good friends with the principal.
I bet.
So we would
If you weren't
have,
before, you are now.
yeah, and we always were. That was what made it again even more impactful. But they did a great job with communicating with the kids and making sure we had meetings and group meetings and town meetings throughout this whole thing, with parents being there and anyone else who just wanted to come and hear an update on the case. And we would update them all the time as this proceedings were going on. We always kept the school involved and up to date of where we were. But it's good, it's something they won't forget, because they understand that they were 6 days away from a small little town in upstate New York being known throughout the world. And they were
Right.
that close to it. Someone in the UK would have known the town's name, and they understand how close they were to that. So, SROs, the outside
School
perimeter
resource
check,
officers.
school.
Sorry.
I know that one.
Sorry.
All the schools in this county actually stepped up after this case and got school resource officers and perimeter checks and all that, even more than they were. So it did help out in the long run.
Wow. What a story. What a story. I wanted to ask you, the day after that's all happened, it's all come out. You're around the dining room table now, your kids know what's happened. They're sitting there with their dad. Does it change their perspective of who you are and how you protect them personally?
I got 3 great kids who are on point. Thankfully, I did teach them some stuff. One of the things real quick just about that, I was driving past the school once while my son was still there, and we're driving past the school, and I always tell my kids there's certain things that they go out of the house with. Even now, they're older, they're doing their thing. Have a plan, know where you are, and just have a plan. That's my main thing. So I'm driving past the school one day with my son after all this had happened, and he goes, "Hey, Dad, see that window up there? We're driving past the school." I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, if I get out there, that leads to the ledge that goes around the other side of the building that I can get down." He knew every exit and window in that school. It was amazing. I mean, and me being what I've done my whole career, looked at him like, "Really?" And I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was, and he just knew which window had a ledge, which window led to here. And I tell kids all the time, have a plan and know where you are. Because here's the thing, you can know that school upside down, backwards, sideways, and walk through it with your eyes closed. But when something stressful is going on and your tunnel vision kicks in, that's gone. And unless it is ingrained and seared in your head, you could get lost in your own school. It happens in homes, during stressful situations, either a burglary or a fire. How many people get trapped because they don't know where to run in their own house because they're so stressed and tunnel visioned into the problem instead of just, listen, it's easy to say, and I don't mean it as easy as I'm going to say it, but there's times you need to take that 1 second, take a deep breath, and then go, and not just immediately go. You need to just get the right frame of what's going on and how do I get out of here. And he did that, and I was pretty proud of him of that. But your initial question, Sarah, the night after was not what you thought, because we had to get up the next day and just do so much more. It was rough. You know what I did do? I did tell Nikki, who was on that hit list.
Right.
And she got upset because those are her, good friends.
Yeah.
That were on that. They were all guys, it was a whole bully thing, which was all nonsense, which wasn't true at all. So I did let her know on that because I thought it was important that she knew that. So if they came to her with what was going on, she was prepared to talk to them about it. I didn't want her going, "Huh? Like, what are you talking about?" And then come back to me. I didn't want that. So I did tell her that. And, I think this situation made them even more alert when they go to places about how quick something can happen, and knowing where stock rooms are, know where exits are, and just know where you are. And if something, I tell them all the time, if they go into New York City, pick a spot. We're going to meet at this spot if literally half the world collapses. Here's where we're going to meet. And I think that's
Sarah,
really,
it's not just me. That's what I did that. My kids, I live in Washington, D.C. And when we moved here, I said to the kids, okay, this rest stop in Ohio, I live in Virginia. I'm like, but this rest stop in Ohio is where we're going to converge, because that's how we can get to grandma's house.
and the other thing I think is important for anyone listening to this, any kids, any parents listening to this is hard to do, but it's very, very important. If something happens in your school or something happens in a store or in a mall, call 911 first, then call your parents. Make that call first and get the information out there that's important. Locations, if you happen to see something where you are, get that information to law enforcement first, because they're going to be the ones getting there first, not your parents. Make the parent call second. I mean, that's hard to do. I get it. But in order to stop maybe what's going on, you need to pass that information to the people who are going to get there first.
Super valuable, Tom. Super
Incredible.
valuable. Thank you.
Can you tell our listeners where they can find all things Tom Smith and Gold Shields?
Yeah, we're on, thankfully, every audio platform that podcasts are on: Apple, Spotify, iHeart, all of them. There's some on that we get surprised at that we don't even know we're on, which is always fun to get that notification of, hey, you hit this. We're like, okay, cool. We have our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@goldshields, and rumble.com are our video channels, and our website, thegoldshieldshow.com. Read about us. You can actually access Spotify and YouTube from our website as well. And, we just thank everyone for tuning in and joining, and we love suggestions and, all that you can leave anywhere on our website. Show suggestions, feedback, all that. And it's just been a blast. And I get to do great shows like this with people I meet at CrimeCon. And you kind of glossed over it a little, Sarah. Katherine, me and Sarah were like watching each other like for like a day and a half. Like, all right, yeah, I need to talk to you, but not yet. Yeah, I need to talk to you, but hold on a minute. And because we were getting so busy with stuff, and then there was a break that we had and we hit it, and we talked for like 25 minutes. We're like, oh wait, I got to go back to my booth. And then afterwards, and you know what, the best part, and I said this to Tabitha and Gretchen, it's amazing when you're in those environments where you meet people and you just click, and in 35 seconds we're going to work together. I'm going to talk to you again. This is going to be a great relationship. And that was me and you. It was just an immediate hookup, immediate click of, all right, yeah, we need to talk and get something done. And
but
here we are.
Also, it was a really fortuitous meeting at that time as well, because literally, I think 10, 15 minutes after I met you, I had somebody come up to my booth who had a real issue, like a dangerous issue that I had no tools in the toolbox to fix. And I went, shit. Where's Tom? And I just went straight back to Tom, and we kind of like all wrapped everybody together. There was, I think Gretchen and Tabitha from Housewives of True Crime had information that could all help. And it was those kind of like special moments where everyone was like, yeah, we're all here for the right reasons and we can do something good, and just tap into everybody's skill set. Not mine. I could bring nothing to that equation. I could bring nothing to that equation but another introduction. But honestly, it was very...
You know what to look for, Sarah. That's the best part.
Mm-hmm.
You're an informed parent.
I hope so. But Tom, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, we'll look forward to talking to you again very soon.
Oh, anytime. Just say the word. Thank you so much for having me and bringing attention to, I think it's one case, but what you can learn from this case, I think, is more important than just what I did or we did. Learning from cases and experiences, I think, is the most important part. And you realizing that, Sarah, was important. And thank you for doing this.
Thank you for joining us on Stop the Killing. Remember, these conversations aren't just important, they're necessary. If you're ready to dive deeper into the issues we cover, Katherine's book, Stop the Killing, and also How to Talk About Guns with Anyone are available now at katherineschweit.com. Stop the Killing is proudly produced by Sarah Ferris Media. For more award-winning podcasts like Conning the Con and Watching Two Detectives, visit sarahferrismedia.com. As an independent podcast, we rely on your support to keep these critical discussions alive. If you value our work, please consider supporting us on patreon.com/stopthekilling or by simply subscribing on Apple Podcasts now. Not only will you help us to continue this mission, but you'll also get early access to ad-free episodes and exclusive content that takes a deeper look into unfolding incidents. And don't forget, Stop the Killing is a team effort. You can make a difference by leaving a review on Apple and sharing this podcast with others. Together, we can keep pushing these conversations forward. Thank you for being part of this journey. Stay safe, stay informed, and let's continue to stop the killing.